Hi, this is Doug Slay, and I have a program called Faith for Everyday Living. And I'm excited to bring to you a message that I think will not only inspire you, but educate you and motivate to action. Because the teaching that we do, we are teaching not just for information, but we want information that you can act on, that's actionable knowledge. And the lesson that we're talking about today, we've given it the title, They Could Not. They could not. I want you to get those words down in your thinking. They could not. This is the setting of this is. It's found in both three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and it's so important. But it's the story of a father who had a son that was called a lunatic, and that he was such a bad a case that the demons would cause him to moan and to groan and to thrash and to actually physically beat up this boy and sometimes throw him in the fire. And so this father wanted help for his son, and he brought him to the disciples because apparently he had heard about Jesus casting out devils. And so he brought him to the disciples. Jesus was not with the disciples at that moment. So he tried to get the disciples to cast out this dumb spirit, this deaf and dumb spirit. That's what it was. And apparently they tried, and no doubt they had cast out demons before. Now let's give a little background of this, because they had seen Jesus cast out demons, and no doubt they had practiced casting out demons themselves. Because if you remember what Jesus did, when he called his disciples, one of the first things he told them to do was to cast out unclean spirits. Now that's a missing doctrine of the church today. We tolerate these things, but we shouldn't tolerate them. We should cast them out. But getting back to the story, the father brought his son that was demonized to the disciples to cast out this unclean spirit, this evil spirit. And the scripture said they could not. And that's where we get the title of the lesson we want us to learn today. I believe there's a lot of times, and I want to rephrase that, restate that. It's not just a lot of times. I don't think we, with the most of the average believers today, knows anything about casting out unclean spirits. I remember in my own home, I would not tolerate strife. And if strife got in, I took the time to cast the spirit of strife out of our home. So we had very little strife in our home because we wouldn't tolerate it. So if you have something going in your life, you might recognize that it's caused by an unclean spirit, an evil spirit, a demonized environment, and you need to take time to cast it out. But before you cast it out, you probably need to learn some things about unclean spirits and how to cast them out from the scripture. So let's get back again to the story. The father brought his son to the disciples to cast out the unclean spirit, and they could not do it. There are kinds of unclean spirits, they're not all the same kind. Some's easier to cast out than the others. So this man and the disciples, they could not cast him out. Then when Jesus came on the scene, he heard the multitude talking about it and so forth, and he inquired what was happening. And the father said to Jesus, he said, I brought my son to your disciples to cast out, and they couldn't do it. So Jesus said, bring him to me. And Jesus cast the demon out, the unclean spirit, the evil spirit. One gospel said the deaf and dumb spirit out of him. And the boy fell on the ground frothing and stuff. So, and people thought he was dead. But Jesus got him by the hand and lifted him up. And he was okay and he was whole. But then I heard the exasperation in Jesus' voice. Have you ever heard the exasperation of Jesus? And when he was talking in the Gospels more than once. But here, listen to what he said. He said, how long shall I be with you? I've been with you. And he was inferring there that the disciples should have been able to cast this unclean spirit out, but they could not. There's a reason they could not, but they needed to find out the reason. So they asked Jesus, said, why couldn't we cast him out? And Jesus gave a one-word answer in one of the Gospels. He said, because of unbelief. Of unbelief stopped you from casting out this unclean spirit. Do you think that's still a problem in the church today? Do you think it's still a problem in my life and your life and other people's lives? That unbelief stops us from casting out unclean spirits and doing the work that God calls us to do. So Jesus said unbelief stopped them. Unbelief is being unpersuaded. Coming to a point in your knowledge you know little, but you don't know enough, and you're not persuaded enough to follow through on what you know. So he said they could not cast him out because of unbelief. Now the title of this lesson is, they could not. I want to say that's an indictment against the church today. That we have this could not and cannot itis, where we cannot, and the reason we cannot is because we still walking in a measure of unbelief. We need to get educated to the things of God, to the educated to casting out unclean spirits, so we can do the work and deliver people and set them free for the power that's tormenting their life. So I hope today that God blesses you and will give you knowledge, actionable knowledge, and you'll learn something from this lesson that will make you want to know more. So this is Doug Slay for Faith for Everyday Living. I pray today that you gain and grow in the knowledge of the Lord and the lessons that we're teaching.